Hey everybody, I am super excited to be organizing this year's Tee Off for Testicular Cancer in Norfolk, Virginia. That's my hometown, or close to my hometown. It's going to be Friday, April 18th of this year. It's going to be at 8:30 a.m. shotgun start with a 4-person best ball scramble with breakfast and lunch provided, contest holes, drawing, and lots of great prizes. So I hope to see all the survivors that can possibly be there out there. It's going to be a great time. Sign up on our website. You can find it under the events tab, and looking forward to Tee Off for Testicular Cancer 2025. The stories shared on It Takes Balls are unique to the individual sharing. Always speak with your trusted medical provider for treatment options specific to you. Welcome back to It Takes Balls, presented by Testicular Cancer Awareness Foundation. Today I'm joined by Surendra. He's a testicular cancer survivor from Malaysia. Surendra, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
So, before we get into your specific story, are you able to give some background on, what the healthcare system is like in Malaysia?
Yeah, so the healthcare system in Malaysia is very well organized, actually. We have government hospitals which are almost free for all Malaysian citizens. Only problem with government hospitals is it can be a bit slow. So when it comes to cancer, especially testicular cancer, I think Stephen, timing is very important. It might be a bit risky to go through the governmental hospital system, although it's free. So we also do have a very strong private healthcare system. So if you have private health insurance, which is not too expensive to get, it is getting more expensive now, you can have access to a lot of private hospitals, which are very efficient. And we do have a lot of specialists here.
For testicular cancer?
Yes. So, well, to be honest with you, when you say a TC expert in the sense like how we know it in the US, like Indiana, most probably not, but someone who can supervise the chemotherapy, who can carry out the oreectomy to remove your testicle, that we do have quite a good volume. But someone who can carry out RPLND, only a few. And even that few would not qualify as a high volume center as defined under the guidelines. So for that, if you want to be extremely safe, you might have to go overseas for that.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So let's talk about your story now. So you were diagnosed with stage 3C, I believe, right? So tell me a little bit about when you first noticed something was going on.
Yeah. So actually my initial symptoms had nothing to do with my testicles. I had on and off abdominal and back pain on the left side. And that started in January 2023. But back then I took it as a stomach issue. So 3 months later, it didn't go off. I saw a stomach specialist, and they did all sort of tests like scopes, ultrasound on the stomach area, and they couldn't find anything. So they just categorized it as a most probably a on and off issue without any diagnosis. So I just left it up until July, which was 7 months in, and then that's when I got very sharp pain on my testicles, and I rushed to emergency. And they immediately did an ultrasound, and that's when they found out there was a lump. And procedure indicated I'd be scheduled for a surgery the next day to remove the testicle. So they did a marker test, and that's when it was diagnosed as testicular cancer. So I suppose, it was 3C because the symptoms for me had nothing to do with the testicles for the longest time. So by the time they found out, it had spread to the lymph nodes in my stomach and my chest area.
What is, the episode that just came out today, the day that we're recording this, was with a survivor who was born in India. And he mentioned that testicles are not something that you really talk about. Is it something that is culturally, talked about as much in Malaysia, or is it kind of, taboo?
Yeah, it is quite taboo. There is almost no awareness here of testicular cancer. So I didn't even know there was such thing as testicular cancer until I got it. And, then I found out that you could actually do your self checks, like women do for breast cancer. And that's something you should be doing, twice a month. If I had known, obviously things would have been different. If I had known that the symptoms I had were known symptoms of testicular cancer, which is why after I got out of treatment, I joined TCAF, and we started trying to raise awareness here in Malaysia. And I don't think it's just a Malaysian thing, though, to be honest with you. I think, like you said, it's more like an Asian thing. It's sort of a taboo subject.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So, you went finally and, they found the lump on your testicles. So what were the next steps for you?
So like any other TC patient, was the orectomy immediately to remove the testicle, and then diagnosed as 3C, so BEP, which is the chemotherapy, bleomycin, etoposide, and cisplatin, 4 cycles. And then, after that, they did another scan, and there were some lymph nodes in my abdomen, which was still enlarged above 1 cm. So I required the retroperitoneal lymph node dissection, RPLND. So as I said, there were a few surgeons in Malaysia who could do it. And there was one surgeon who does it quite frequently because he's very good at it. But mine had a bit of a complication because one of the lymph nodes, the tumor was sitting on the vein in the kidney, which could complicate things. So by chance, I was scheduled for surgery in December 2023, but by chance, I met someone who knew a doctor in India who does it robotically in a post chemo setting, and he's experienced. So I don't think there are many doctors in the world who could do it robotically in a post chemo setting. Like I think in the US, that's not very encouraged. So I took the chance. I went to India. I did it, and yeah, thankfully there was no complication at all. Until now, I'm still fine. There was no tumor left, so the surgery went quite well. So I think my journey or treatment ended sometime in January 2024.
Gotcha. So jumping back, so being diagnosed stage 3C, did you have metastasis to your lungs as well?
No, so there was no metastasis to another organ. The furthest metastasis was to the lymph node in the chest area. Yes, I think I would be 3B, I think.
Okay. All right. And I know that you're a lawyer, right?
Yeah.
So were you able to kind of continue working through your treatment, or did you have to take some time off?
I was partly working. So while the chemo and recovering from the chemo, thankfully in Malaysia, I think it's similar in all other states. When COVID happened, we moved to hearings by Zoom or online, and a lot of things were done online, and that sort of carried on after COVID. So because of that, I could still do some work, but like heavy work, like physical trials, I had to let go. But yeah, so I was still working off my laptop on and off. And I had my own firm. I have my own firm. So that makes it better for me. So I sort of choose what I want and don't want to do.
Yeah, you could give yourself some paid time off.
Yeah, I can give myself as much time as I want as well.
So let's talk about like the orchiectomy. So was your recovery from your orchiectomy pretty easy, or was there any complications or notable events with your recovery?
Yeah, the orchi was fairly straightforward. There was no complications. I think the surgery was done in like half an hour. The recovery took maybe 3 days. And then immediately I was fixed for chemo 2 weeks down the road because they didn't want to wait. And my tumor had, I think, what did they call it? Embryal carcinoma and choriocarcinoma. So I think they were the two most aggressive components. So I think they just didn't want to wait. And then they wanted to get it done as fast as possible, the chemo.
Yeah. And did you bank sperm at all? Was that something that they talked about?
Yeah, they did. That was one of the first things. So they said right after I was discharged, they were like, get it done. I didn't plan. I don't plan to have kids. But they said, look, plans might change down the road, so why not just to get it done? So I got that done as well before the chemo.
Is that something that your governmental hospitals, do they pay for that, or do you have to pay for that?
Yeah, so the government hospitals, they don't. It's the insurance would not have covered it. I think. To be fairly honest, I did not check. But it's not all hospitals here have that. Only the private ones that have it. But you do have fertility centers, quite a number of them, where you can get it done, but you got to pay for yourself. So I think for me, because of the timing, I just didn't have the time to apply for insurance just for that part of it. And I only had 10 days, I think. And I think, because you want to do it, you got to abstain for 4 or 5 days and then go and get the collection done. So I think the timing was just as such that I just got it done myself.
Gotcha. Okay. And then the nodes that you had swollen after your orchiectomy, do you remember the sizes of those?
Yeah, I think the biggest one in the abdomen was about 6 cm, I think. Was it 6, 7 cm? And then on the chest, it was about 5 cm, the biggest.
Oh, yeah. Wow. All right. So yeah, let's talk about your chemo experience. Did you have any side effects from that, or were you able to handle it pretty well?
I think I handled it pretty well. No major side effects. The first 2 cycles, nothing major, just the usual nausea, fatigue, lethargy, stomach issues, gastric, diarrhea. But you have medication for to deal with those. It was only in the third and fourth cycle, I think, where I think maybe got a bit hard. But even then, I don't recall any major incident where I had to get hospitalized for it. So I never had to get rushed to emergency or get rushed to the hospital for anything. I think it was just the fourth cycle that was hit me quite hard. But yeah, I think throughout the four cycles, I could still do physical activities. I still walked, did yoga. I was working a bit. I would game. But the only thing is like, the BEP, the first 5 days gets a bit boring because you're in the hospital like, I think 8-9 hours, like the whole day. So I just had something with me to occupy myself. But yeah, thankfully, I think no major side effects.
Do you have any like of the ringing in the ears or any neuropathy or anything?
Yeah, so the long-term side effects is I have tinnitus, the ear ringing, which is here even now. I think that's going to be permanent. But to be honest, I'm used to it. So if you ask me not to have it, it'll be weird because I'm just used to it right now. And it only becomes a bit obvious in a quiet environment. So if I'm talking to people like now, I don't really notice it. So that's, I think, a permanent side effect. Neuropathy, when I was going through chemo, I had it, but I think now I don't have it anymore. Besides, I just have the weird side effects. Like I tend to sweat easily now if I eat spicy food, which I never was the case. My hair grows a bit differently, but I think those for me, things I would gladly take for what I got in return.
Yeah. How was your support system? Do you have any family or any, significant others or friends that were with you through treatment?
Yeah, I had family with me and they were very supportive. So I moved in with them back again when I was going through chemo. So my parents, my mother and father, they were, the strongest support system. My father would take me for chemo. He'll drive me, make sure I got everything. And my mom would, cook and make sure the meals were all taken care of and take care of me at home. My sister was at home as well. She's a dentist, so she helped around. So yeah, my family was there, and my mom followed me to India for the RPLND. So she was there taking care of me as well. So yeah, I think they were like the major support system for me.
Yeah. So then after chemo, when, I guess it sounds like you still had an enlarged lymph node. Did it shrink to, do you remember the size it shrunk to?
Yeah, it shrunk to about 2.53 cm, I think, in the abdomen. And there were quite a few of it that was above 1 cm, which is the cutoff size, which is why the recommendation was, I did consult Dr. Einhorn via email because the initial recommendation here was, well, let's wait and see sort of thing because RPLND was a big thing here in Malaysia. And, because there was no specialist or high volume center, we sort of hold off from RPLND unless it's really necessary. But I think Dr. Einhorn said, look, guideline is quite clear. Do RPLND. It has to be done ideally 6 weeks from the last chemo. And, he's the world expert. So I went with his advice. Like I said, there was one surgeon here who could do it. There was one in India, which later came into the picture, and he was, he did it robotically. So because it's all fewer above 1 cm, I decided to just get it done and as risky of a surgery it is, but the peace of mind that comes after it, I think for me at least, it was important.
Yeah. Talk about the decision to go to India. Is that just geographically the closest to you, or was there a specific doctor in India that Einhorn recommended or that you had researched and found to be an expert?
So I did research and it was by chance, as I said, I was in court, I think. This was after my chemo while waiting for my RPLND to be done here. So I was in court for a case and someone in the gallery noticed that I didn't have any hair and I seemed a bit unwell. So, she then asked and I told. And by chance, her uncle was a uro-oncologist in Miami, US. I can't remember the hospital name, but he specializes in DC as well in the US. She reached out to him and said, look, why not you just speak to him? No harm. So I did, and he was super helpful. His name is Dr. Mano. And he said, this is a serious surgery. In the US, we take it seriously. And I suggest you do it as well. And he said, I have a friend in India who does it quite often, and he does it robotically. And if you want, I can put you up with him. So he did that. and I did my own research on the doctor in India. His name is Dr. Jinil, and he's very well known for this as well. So he, by chance, he said, "Look, I can slot you in end of December. Although I'm going to be away for holiday, but I'll sacrifice the holiday and I'll come back to the surgery for you," which was very nice of him. So I said, let's just do it. So we just went to India and did it.
That's amazing. And I love that the kind of these TC specialists around the world all kind of know each other.
Yeah,
I mean, it is a rare
sort of
disease, but it's cool that they all work together.
Yeah, I think the urologist network. So, like even Dr. Mano from US, he comes to Malaysia because he does have family here. So he comes to Malaysia. And whenever he's here, he sort of meets up with all the TC urologists in Malaysia. So I think he was very connected to the network, even in Asia as well, which was quite helpful.
What is kind of the incidence of testicular cancer in Malaysia? I know that you've kind of worked with Kim from TCAF to make the brochures in for your community. Do you know like the numbers of how many people are diagnosed per year?
No, so we don't have numbers for that. There are numbers. I think just very little research by the Cancer Society on TC here actually. So yeah, when I was working with Kim as well, it was so difficult to get the numbers for Malaysia. And yeah, there's no number of diagnoses per year, and because it's not even spoken about, it's hard to find out. And I guess because TC here is one of the lowest cancer occurrences compared to any other cancer, and that's why there's no impetus for people to do anything about it as well. So even like getting the brochures out was so difficult, even though it was paid for. It's just so difficult to get anyone to even get it.
Yeah. So you mentioned it's difficult to get it out. So, but are people are they taking it in finally? Are they like putting it in their clinics for their patients?
Yeah, so some hospitals have taken it after me reaching out and like going and delivering it to them. But the target was also to get it to like universities, because that's where your students are, and that's the main target group. Yeah, but most of them never responded. Or they would respond once and that's it. So that there's no interest. But if you, let's say, talk about awareness for breast cancer or lung cancer, yeah, that's something people would take more seriously. But testicular cancer, because of how low the occurrence is, people just don't really take it seriously.
Yeah. Sorry, I went on a tangent there. Let's jump back to your RPLND. So you had it robotically. Did you have like 5 incisions or what kind of is your scarring like nowadays?
Yeah, so he uses quite a different system, not the Da Vinci robot. There's a different system. So there are 5 incisions from the side. So there are 5 scars. So the complication, like I said, was one tumor was sitting on the kidney vein. So the surgery took about 13 hours, because he had to resect the vein, remove the tumor, put the vein and patch it back up. So they did it without having to remove the kidney, which was the aim, and that was achieved. The only complication, which had nothing to do with the surgery at the time per se, was a lymphatic leak. So the recovery was fine, 3 days, but the lymphatic drain, the tube is still outside from my abdomen. That didn't stop. And that's quite rare. I think it happens, but it's very rare. I was on a low-fat diet, but it didn't stop. It didn't stop for 2 weeks. Oh, wow. So I stayed on in India for 2 weeks, and eventually I was like, look, I can't keep staying here. So can I just go back with the drain? You'll put like a pouch or something, which they did. So I went back to Malaysia, and it didn't stop for another 2 weeks. It was like 1 liter every day, and that was maybe a bit annoying because I couldn't move around much. I had to stay at home. Although I was feeling fine, but I still had to stay at home. So yeah, eventually after back and forth, I got admitted here again to carry out a lymphangiogram. And even that, because RPLND itself is rare here, then talk about a lymphatic leak, that's like even more rare. And in Malaysia, I think there is radiologists who can do something like that. I think there's only 2 of them. So I went to one, and he said, look, I only done this once in my life, but theoretically it's very easy. But a lymphangiogram is not very complicated procedures. You just put a needle in and you put the liquid in, and it moves up your lymphatic system to find out where the leak is. So it's not a complicated thing. He said, look, I can do it. It's not complicated. And thankfully, the procedure itself stopped the leak, because there's a 60% chance of that happening. The dye is sort of, like glue. So yeah, for 1 month, I was having a lymphatic leak. So that to me was the only complication, if at all, from the procedure.
Oh my gosh. What, like,
Yeah.
okay, so talk about the leak. What was, I mean, you had a drain, right? So
Yeah.
you could see it coming out. What color was it?
Yeah, it was yellow. It looked like urine. It was not urine, but it looked like urine, which is why everyone was confused. Because lymph, the way people understand it here, it's that it has to be cloudy, and then they'll call it lymph. So I think it's called like chylous ascites. So there are many kinds of lymphs. Chylous is one of them. So that's why a lot of people are just trying to figure out what it was. And because I was not in India with my primary surgeon, like he was clear what it was. He was like, go on a no-fat diet, 2 weeks. If it doesn't go down, do a lymphangiograph, get the leak, and then you can do through radiologists, you can sort of like plug the leak. But the doctors here, I think they just did not know what was happening. So eventually, thankfully, the lymphangiograph kind of stopped the leak.
Where was it draining to? Was there some kind of collection bag or something that you were regularly changing, or?
Yes, so there was a collection bag which was attached to the drain, which I had to empty like 3 or 4 times a day because it was 1 liter a day. So the normal collection bag only can take in like 250 ml. So like every 2 hours I had to go and empty it, which means I couldn't really go out because I had to have access to the toilet almost all the time. And the bag is not in a way that you could really hide it. You got to get a really long shirt, like really long shirt if you want to hide it. So I was just stuck at home until one point I just got admitted. So in the hospital it was worse because they would help empty it for you, but that means you're just stuck on the hospital bed for a long time. So yeah, I mean that part was to me more difficult than the chemo and the surgery because you're feeling good, but you're just basically bedridden, and that was mentally difficult because there was no end game for that. Like no doctor could tell you when the leak was going to stop. They'll say they will stop, but they'll never can give you an end date for it.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, that for me was after the cancer was dealt with. I think that was the more difficult part. And I was speaking with a few survivors from the group as well, mostly in the US, UK, who had similar problems. And I think one of them, I won't mention names, of course, one of them had it for almost 5 months post surgery. So for 5 months, he was having it. And I think it was only in the fifth month, after a 5 month, not a no fat diet, but a liquid diet, where you feed through IV, did it stop? And that to me was wow, 5 months. I don't know if I would last that for 5 months.
Wow, that is insane.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about, you mentioned the healthcare system in Malaysia. How does that work when you go to another country for your surgery? Are you paying out of pocket for your surgery? Does your insurance in Malaysia cover your surgery in India?
Yeah, so the insurance I got, generally they would if you can show that you can't get the surgery done in Malaysia. So in this case, the insurers did cover quite a substantial part of the surgery in India. And I guess I was also fortunate in a way that the surgeon in India works in a hospital called Amrita Hospital, which is a non-profit based hospital. So the entire surgery, including of my stay in the ICU for 2 days and my stay in the hospital for like a week, with food, lodging, with my mom, her lodging, I think the whole thing cost around 7,000 US dollars roughly, which by Malaysian standards would be considered extremely cheap. If I'd done it here in Malaysia in a private hospital, it would have cost easily 60, 70,000 US dollars. It would have been covered by the insurers. But the cost of the surgery in India was much cheaper because the hospital was a non-profit hospital. So in a way, I had no issue of paying it myself, but the insurers did cover a substantial part of it.
Yeah, that's great. What advice do you have for guys who have maybe just been diagnosed and found this podcast as a resource?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I think I've been in the shoes. We all have been there, and it would be difficult at first. I mean, for me, it was very, very difficult when I first found out because I didn't even know there was such thing as DC, and you start googling, and while some information on Google might be accurate, there's a lot of inaccurate information, and I think it was only 3 or 4 days in. It was a dark place, but I found the Facebook group, the TCF Facebook group, and to me that was a turning point in the journey. It really helped a lot because you had people in similar positions who could help provide support and share information, generally which are accurate. So I think that changed a lot. Speaking to people who are in the similar situation as I am, you have friends and support systems, but they won't be able to understand what you're going through. So this podcast, the group, that would help a lot. So I would say, take your time, but at some point it would really help if you join the group and voice your concerns out. Like, how can we help the journey? So, for example, when I joined the group, I read a lot of posts. There were a lot of encouraging posts. There are some posts maybe where people share bad news as well, which happens, I suppose, and that might be discouraging. But what you would notice is there are more positive posts than negative posts, and you will find out eventually that testicular cancer is a very curable cancer if you deal with it correctly. And I think that's the important part of it. And to get there, you need to do your own reading and speak to people. So I guess the main thing I would say is to reach out to people in the group. And so far, from my experience, they all been very helpful in the group. And I've never seen a scenario where there is no one that's willing to reach out and help you. So even with the lymphatic leak I had, which is a very rare occurrence, I posted it in the group, and immediately like 3 to 4 people messaged and said, look, we have gone through this. And then I could speak to them about the problem and they could help out. So I think the support system that we have is amazing. And even though it's an international setting, so I didn't know anyone in Malaysia who had TC. Most of the people I spoke to were in the US and the UK. But even then, it was immensely helpful.
Yeah, I mean, without the group, you probably wouldn't have found Dr. Einhorn, and the course of your whole treatment would have been different.
Yeah, and then I mean, credit really. I mean, to him, his email was easily obtained, and he responded to me like within 3 hours on a weekend, which is insane. Like his dedication to the work he did.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely amazing. Touching Malaysia, I'm sure he's probably touched, I don't even know how many countries there are, like 190 something. He's probably touched all of them.
I know. And I until today, I've seen the group, like people who keep posting, like asking for his email. And so I'm sure he gets, like, I don't know, tons of emails daily. But the fact that he takes his time to respond to these emails, outside his work setting, without any expectation in return, is quite amazing. I think to find a doctor like that is so difficult.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to add that we didn't talk about already?
No, I think that's about it. I have nothing to add, I think. I guess the only thing I'll add is if you are diagnosed and if you're fairly young, like, in teens to your 30s, early 40s, and if you're physically active, I think that helps a lot. If you can be physically active during your chemo. I think that helps a lot. And it will also help with, touch wood, if you don't, I hope no one needs to do an RPLND, but if you do need to do an RPLND, I think being physically active helps a lot with the recovery process as well.
Great advice. Surendra, where can people find you if they want to connect and learn more?
Yeah, so I am public about my diagnosis, and I do awareness campaigns. I speak about it publicly. So I'm on Facebook. It's Surendra Ananth. I'm also on LinkedIn. And Instagram. Yeah. So if you want to find me and connect with me, you can always add me. If you want to speak to me about it, my channel's always open. I got a lot of help from people in the group, and which is why I feel like, I should return the favor as well.
Amazing. Surendra, thank you so much for being on It Takes Balls.
Thanks, Ian.
For more information and resources for your testicular cancer journey, visit testicularcancerawarenessfoundation.org. You can also follow us on social media at Testis Cancer. We're on Facebook at Testicular Cancer Awareness Foundation.